legally kidnapped and Child Protective Services whistleblower, Carlos Morelos.
Hey everyone. Hope you're all enjoying yourselves. Obviously, because the name of the speech is Kidnapping for the State, this is going to be the comedic portion of the day. It's going to be nothing but fun stuff. So the reason why I'm here and I'm giving this speech right now is because I'm guilty of working for the state. Not in a simple bureaucracy like your DMV, right? But actually working for Child Protective Services. Now the term guilt is often misused. But in my case, I think it's what's right. Because Child Protective Services, as I first explained to Luke Radowski a number of years ago, is what can only be described as a domestic terrorist cell. Within the United States, there are 400,000 kids right now in CPS care. How many of you want to guess how many kids are actually removed for physical or sexual abuse? Like what the percentage is? Well, damn libertarians. It's 20%. 20% of those removals are for physical or sexual abuse. The vast majority are there for what is called neglect. Now, neglect is an ever-broadening term, and that's kind of the point, because it can mean you're unschooling, homeschooling. I had cases in which I had to go investigate and talk to dozens of people because a child was allowed to ride his bike home. And for a huge percentage of these removals, it was for marijuana use. A parent decides one day to smoke just a little bit, and as a result, they end up in a position whereby Child Protective Services comes into their home and takes away their kids, and they lose them forever. So when I came to recognize what was going on in the system that I was a part of, I had to acknowledge that I was a part of a system that was grinding up people's lives. And so I could run upon the central narrative, the central worldview, which was that government is good and what we were doing was right, or I could make the decision that I needed to skirt that away and attempt to live a more virtuous and meaningful life. And as a result, I became the anarchist who's now in Mexico talking to y'all right now. Now, what occurred was I had to make a choice as to not just quitting, but to come out and start talking very, very publicly about it. Because before me, there had never been a whistleblower against Child Protective Services in its entirety. Never. And I wasn't just going to go against CPS, I was going to go against the state. It wasn't simply about reforming, it was about abolishing. And when you push that forward, the abolishment of a system that so many people believe in, that sticks you in a position where you're going to be completely on the defensive. And as a result as well, though, you have a lot of people who are going to put a lot of weight onto you. As I mentioned before, 400,000 kids. There's a tremendous amount of angst and frustration going on with parents across the world, namely in the United States, but CPS in its forms exist across the world, who are looking for a Messiah, looking for a martyr, someone who's going to have the answers to be able to get their damn kid back, who was taken away just years ago, and they're never going to be able to see him again. And the weight of that, when it's placed on you, can create a sense of guilt and create a sense of shame, because no matter what I did, no matter the amount of kids I prevented from getting into foster homes, no matter the organization that I started which helped out parents, pro bono work, just to prevent them from getting out, I never felt as if I could get a full form of redemption, because I always felt a sense of guilt that I wasn't able to do more. And with every good life story, there has to be a redemption in the third act. And the only way I was really going to be able to do that was by recognizing the fact that being a CPS whistleblower was only one aspect of the life story that I'm living right now. When you break any of us down, we're these human beings who are clinging on to a convertible rock that's ushering us through a burning star. We're being held down by gravity as we speak right now. We get to be here, and we're about 1 out of a trillion sperm. I mean, we are lucky, right? And from that, we were created and able to create the lectern that's right here, the lectern, and the video that's right behind me. Right? We are so lucky right now to be able to open our eyes, if only for a moment, to see the beauty that is the world, me, you, everyone here. But so many of us choose to take that for granted. We'll say life sucks, the world is bleak, human beings are awful. And this kind of worldview creates a dogma. And with that dogma, it teaches us that human beings are innately wicked and evil, and that we must be gagged and bound and beaten. And that is not sexual innuendo. The state as it exists right now is the outward projection of unprocessed trauma that occurred to us at a younger age. Right? We believe what our parents told us, what our society told us, that we were bad and that we needed to be ruled, or else we were going to be too radical. Remember, libertarians, we all suffer from oppositional defiant disorder. Right? We're all living in that. So people start to believe that they need to create a new system in order to knock out those inner terrible aspects of themselves. A large group of men to use violence against us. And what's repeated is a justification for that. That no matter the gears that break our bones, that destroy our lives and souls, it's worth it, because at least we're not like those savages of the past. Taxation, war, pharmaceutical abuse, these are all worth it because they're just one aspect to make our lives better, because without it, we'll be living like those savages in the past. But in actuality, we're always living in the past. We're the unreliable narrators of our own life story. Our memories mere blips and sounds that we culminate and put together. And when we're actually attempting to even remember something, we're taking an undirected nosedive in our own subconsciousness, picking up random artifacts, twisting them together to create an idea which is our life story. But in actuality, there is no self to speak of. There are commonalities and traits which come along with me on a day-to-day basis, but the man I am right now is not the man I am right now. It's completely shifting as we go by. And by the time the image comes into my mind right now, of that little camera right now, and actually flips the image, that moment, that present moment is already gone. The immediate time I try to grab a hold of the present, it dances away. And so rather than attempt to grab a hold of the present for dear life, I attempt to dance with it, because the moment that it's over is the moment that I sleep forever. What occurs in these cases, the trouble really comes in whenever we try to impose our own narratives onto other individuals, right? Our own fear, our own hate. And that truly creates the real savage state that we're all worried about. Through that savage state, it destroys not only our body, our minds, and our souls. In a world that is so filled with beautiful colors, with beautiful art, so many of us choose to paint with the color red and death. The saddest aspect of working for CPS that I found was not necessarily what we were doing, but it was the people who were making the phone calls in the first place. It was the upset neighbors that were mad that someone was playing music a little bit too loud, so they decided to make up an abuse claim. I had people tell me right in front of my face. I remember one case where it stated there was a Mexican mafia that had strippers and cocaine and heroin and every single possible drug. When I spoke to them afterwards, after the investigation was done, it turned out that they had made up all of those things. They're simply going after another person. Who needs the police when it is your neighbor who will pull down your leg to prevent you from reaching freedom? Who needs the police when we have a society that is so devoid of any true sense of rebellion? And how does it all wind up together? How does this system continue to feed itself? Well, one of the great ideas that was propelled obviously thousands of years ago, but more so over the course of this last 300 years, was the idea of democracy, which is a false sense of empowerment. It allows us all right now to feel a collective sense of guilt and blame for things that we're not doing in the present, because we can blame ourselves for those who are doing things against us. Right? So it creates a necessary us versus them mentality. In order to be able to gain, to win, the other side has to lose. When you take that at its hold, though, and you're trying to move towards a better society in the future, you kind of acknowledge that you have to do more than just hate the state, right? If I were to turn off the light switch of government right now, it would do absolutely nothing, because those are simply buildings. It is the people who believe in these ideas. The state flourishes off of hate, bigotry, and coercive tribalism. Its opposition is love, free thought, critical thinking, and empathy. It is not enough to remove the chains, for we can still fall in the traps on a constant basis. How many libertarians and anarchists do you guys know who are living unhealthy, terrible lives while yelling at people online about how to live their lives? I've been that guy plenty of times. Why would anyone, if sales is about mirroring, right? That's a big aspect. You want people to be like you. You're trying to propel this idea. Why would anyone want to live in a free world if a free world is being propagated by people who are living sad and unhealthy lives? It's because people are dedicating their lives to that which is outside their realm of influence. They are letting their own lives go to hell while trying to control things that they've never had control over in the first place. And they continue to do it again and again and again. So for me, it was, while working for CPS, I had to acknowledge these things. I had to come to the terms of, I'm creating a terrible world, not only for myself, but for others. And so I had to not sit by anymore. I had to try to implement a change to help other individuals. In order to truly go against the state, I had to embrace the idea of loving myself and embodying anarchy in the first place. And that allowed me to be here among friends. And I'm really, really happy that I am here. But when we take a look at the media, the central narrative of society right now, there's a sad amount of things that are being propagated. Satire has replaced wisdom as certainty has become a relic of the past. Relativism is considered the intellectual position where absolutism is something to only be done by Christian fundamentalists. You have feelings over facts, outrage over strength, frustration constantly, rather than trying to achieve actual goals, and shame is used as a tool to bring people down just as low as you are. And probably the worst is that success is considered theft. Bernie Sanders ran an entire campaign on it. The way we got here, though, was a trifecta. Actually has a lot to do with child protective services, too. In the early 1900s, progressivism, positivism, and nihilism. That trifecta allows for individuals to not believe that they can learn themselves, right? Because everything is arbitrated out to externalize powers. It ensures consistent conflict. Now, the way CPS was a microcosm of this was that it had its founding in the eugenics movement in the United States. Though a lot of people think of eugenics, they just think of the Nazis. In fact, a lot of those ideas actually came from British aristocracy living within the United States. Margaret Sanger, Francis Galton, individuals like that. And essentially, the eugenics movement was about the scientific planning and management of society to mirror that of the British aristocracy and what has been known as Western values. Right? They did this by preventing immigration and through a number of government programs, including forcible sterilization, government family planning, public education, nonprofit think tanks, the complete takeover of the family by the state. And though we talk about government incompetence, that, whenever we go to the DMV, that's the true government, honestly, the government did a hell of a job. From 1904 to 1974, there was 100,000 sterilizations in the United States. 100,000 right here on our land. And the way by which they did that was channeled through Child Protective Services. So we have a Native American population, we stick them in a reservation and prevent them from being able to actually trade with one another in order to help them out. We then say, if you continue to have kids, we will take away your food stamps. So either be sterilized or starve. That was a way to create a noble form of genocide. Outside of the 100,000 forcible sterilizations, the other things they were able to implement were the destruction of homeschooling as we know it, or at least our views of it. How many of you have heard that homeschooling is just for fundamentalist Christians and dummies who want to keep people away from knowing the truth? I mean, that is constantly told to us in the media and on television, right? Perpetual warfare was another aspect of it, and then the creation of CPS. And all of these notions are run on the idea from the narrative we discussed earlier that government is necessary and that when the government fucks up, it just needs more money, right? The saddest aspect of all of this is that these are not evil people. They're not Satanist lizard people who are trying to destroy all of humanity. They believe that what they are doing is good. If it was simply that they were evil, we could just kill them. And we'd be done with it. Then we'd be in a peaceful society tomorrow. They have the best interests in mind, but with no principles behind it. And so to kind of understand that in order to move forward, we have to empathize with those individuals. Because honestly, while I was working for CPS, I wasn't thinking about fucking up kids' lives. That was not my central motive. I was there because I wanted to help out people. In the same way that people who were running the concentration camps thought they were helping out people, right? They were all running off of life's story. We are all capable of being wicked, and we are capable of being good. But living in a past of shame and guilt, where we think about nothing but the small little things that happen to us one day at one time, where we call ourselves liars and cheaters and terrible people because we made one mistake, stewing in that form of aggravation does not lead itself to a sense of freedom or true autonomy. That's living in a perpetual trap. What we must do is ground ourselves in principles in order to ensure that we can find some kind of order and meaning in a chaotic world, lest we create a perpetual hell for ourselves. Hell not in the sense of pitchforks, but the kind of hell we put one another through on a day-to-day basis. I know I'm getting really shot up in the metaphors and analogies and everything else. This is kind of how my brain works. But let me put some data as far as how I put kids through hell. Foster kids, 7 to 8 times more likely to be physically or sexually abused than impoverished children. They are 3 times more likely to be put on psychotropic medications. Do you know why? Because you think, oh, well, they're just putting them on drugs. Foster families get more money if a kid has more disabilities. Strip a kid from his home, from his community, his school, his church, his friends. Stick him in a place where he's being regularly abused. Do you know what's going to happen? He's going to have issues sleeping, staying awake, paying attention at school. For us, this makes sense. But for the state doctors, that's oppositional defiant disorder, ADHD, bipolar disorder, insomnia, schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder. And I knew 7-year-old kids on 7 different types of psychotropic medications. That is hell. For me, the way I was able to get through that, though, was trying to make a sense of heaven in my own life. In the book of Revelations, I promise this isn't going to be a Christian thing, by the way. The analogy works. Hell is described as to be tormented with fire and brimstone. The smoke of their torment ascended up forever and ever, and they have no rest, day or night. No rest, day or night. Let me tell you a little bit about how I got here. When I was 7, right, I was stuck on psychotropic medications. I was stuck on Ritalin at the age of 7 because they thought I had ADHD. By the time I was 11, they thought I'm still having issues paying attention, so they stuck me on Adderall. That Adderall led to me being hostile on certain occasions. So they called me bipolar at the age of 12. I was stuck on a drug called Depakote. And then I was put on another drug, an anti-schizophrenic medication called Zyprexa, which, by the way, was the reason why Ozzy Osbourne talked so weird in those videos, because he was doped up on that. I was on that medication too, at 12, right? So I had no rest day or night. I was on one drug to stay up, one drug to remain stable, and then another drug to go to bed. And I never felt anything for years. And when I turned 15, my heart finally gave up. I had atrial fibrillation, my pulse went up to 200. They had to stick me in a little gurney and get my heart back to normal. After that, wisely, they said, let's get him off the Adderall. they kept me on the other medications. The medications that I was given as a side effect of the other drugs. So I went from a 15-year-old basketball player to a pre-diabetic 330-pound person within 2 years. From 16, 200, to 18, 320. Right? Then I moved out. I got off the drugs, and I lost about 150 pounds since then. And my way of coping with that feeling was first anger and hostility towards others. Fuck yeah, I'm mad. Totally justified. You know, I was almost killed because of these drugs, so I definitely had that. I also went on a quest for external validation in any single place I could find it. That means a lot of things to a lot of people, but I was trying to find happiness through other people giving me gratification, right? And I had a lot of hostility towards my parents, right? Without recognizing the fact that they were in a position themselves that was incredibly hurtful. So instead of living with that pain, I sat down with my parents and I expressed my frustration. They actually both went to therapy and we talked it out, and I love my parents more than I've ever loved anyone else in my entire life. Without them, I couldn't be here right now. And when I quit Child Protective Services, I had to find that same sense of empathy and love in order to be able to move forward. I had to love myself, then love my neighbor in order to find heaven on earth for me. With the information I presented, foster kids, the war state, progressivism, eugenics, it's easy to become a huge ball of hate, right? Just always mad. What does that get you? Nowhere. I contest that mercy is the greatest of virtues because it allows peace within yourself and peace in others. I had to be merciful with myself. Thoreau essentially stated that so many of us bat at the branches of evil rather than striking at the root. And I contest that the reason for that is because we took so little time trying to heal ourselves that we were nothing but twigs. But if we can strengthen our roots, strengthen our tree, so that we can move out our limbs to our friends and our families, so they can root up as well, then we will see the root of all evil, the state, is nothing but a twig in and of itself, and it'll crumble. Because if we want to live a world that is worth living in, a voluntarist world where people actually have hope, we cannot build that upon always casting the first stone. We need to build it upon loving our neighbor. That's it. CPS stuff? Anything? Do you guys have any questions? I would love to answer anything we got here. You, there you go.
The question, yes.
Right. The good-looking man in the cannabis shirt.
More of a comment, actually. You're completely right. Everything you said is completely true. But my mom told me there's 3 things you don't want to. I will disown you if you become these 3 occupations: a police officer, a meter maid, or a social worker. So they tried to take me away from my mom. That would have been the worst decision ever. So thankfully, they realized this is completely BS. And so you're completely right. Thank you for doing the work you're doing.
Thank you.
What did you do to stop having resentment toward the situation that made you feel like you were wronged? I feel like I have a lot of resentment toward members of my close relations that have made me feel uncomfortable through the decisions they've made, and I constantly feel resentment toward them and anger on a daily basis that I wake up, it wakes me up at night, and I'm curious how you got over some of those feelings.
Absolutely. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways, obviously, right? Here's an interesting thing. Most kids are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. They just don't realize they're being traumatized regularly because the context was never added there. And so the ways by which we deal with trauma, it's going to be on an individual basis. Now, you're asking me personally, my end, why not? I wrote a whole article about it. MDMA. Actually, MDMA in a therapeutic way allowed to cut down a lot of the filters, which are preventing me from really being able to open myself and to feel that true sense of empathy. So there's a mixture of MDMA and another thing called EMDR therapy, which was also used for people with post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as somatic therapy. So those are some avenues. I know it's not that romantic of an answer for you guys, but I can tell you really want that change. And a simple 2 sentences from me, that ain't gonna do it. Go reach out for help, because I can tell that you definitely want to get there. And every single human being is worthy and deserving of love, so there's no reason to live a life without it.
How can people protect against those CPS from taking their kids away and stuff?
Okay.
Is there a way?
There's a lot there. And by the way, for people who are really interested, I did write a book, Legally Kidnapped, the case against Child Protective Services. It's like $5. If you're dealing with a case, I just send it to people for free, but I'm not supposed to say that. But really, like, just pick it up. It's really instructive and helpful in that. The main things are recognizing what CPS is, first and foremost, right? The biggest problem with many people, definitely not the anarchists here, is that we trust status. Because we were told at a young age that authority figures are the ones who we should listen to. The most fascinating thing is that kidnappings overall right now are insanely low compared to the majority of history, unless you're working for the state. Then it's crazy high. So people don't think of those statistics. It's mostly the government who is doing these type of kidnappings and performing these terrible injustices in individuals. So recognize that when a CPS worker comes to you, that they're not there for your benefit, that they're going to manipulate all of your words. That's first and foremost is important, because you're not going to want to contradict yourself. You want to make sure that you're recording your entire conversation, which you are legally allowed to do, right? Because here's an interesting aspect. The write-ups that they do with Child Protective Services afterwards, the investigators, have to write it in a story-based mode. So there's no actual facts in what they're reporting against you. The best defense you have is a camera. For kids, though, and this is just a thing if you have children here, even if they're 5 or 6, let them know who Child Protective Services is, because basically, I was allowed as a 24-year-old guy with a sociology degree to go talk alone with children in public schools in a room by themselves, keeping a recording going on while I manipulated them in order to be able to give me the answers I wanted. That's the beginning of the investigation, and they don't even tell the parents about it first. So do not allow for private interviews with your kids. This is, it's a long kind of thing, but don't contradict yourself. Do not admit any kind of blame. Certainly do not admit to any prior drug use, because they can bring up you smoking weed in college as a reason why you're not a good parent now. Do not admit to things like past domestic violence disputes. Not with the partner you're with right now, but even if you say, I've dated a guy 6 years ago, and he hit me. And by the way, they ask all these questions. You just don't know it. They're leading you on the entire time to get the information they want, because a CPS investigator is convinced before they even talk to you that you are guilty, because parents are bad. This is the narrative that's run in CPS. Hope that was able to answer some of it. Hi there.
Hi, Carlos. I talked to you last night, and first of all, we were on exactly the same wavelength, and we noticed when we talked, and I hadn't met you before last night, that our talks had sort of a link, and the link was moving towards self-forgiveness and empathy and love. And my talk is not directly about that, but it sort of ties into that. And there's other people at this conference who I've noticed their talks they have a link to the same sort of topic. And I just wanted to say that I don't think that's an accident. And the other thing is that there's a lot of hatred and a lot of resentment and a lot of tearing down, even among anarchists and people in the liberty community. And we've had enough of that. So fuck that. The first thing I want to do is validate you and tell you that you're fucking awesome for getting this far. Okay? And I want to thank you for doing the internal work that you did on yourself to try to heal yourself, because resentment, and I wanted the man over here that stood up and said you had issues with resentment. I think it's so fucking important that we let go of resentment and hatred, because it's not doing anything to get us anywhere. It's only hurting you. It's like shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything to solve your problems. And so it's not like you're getting revenge on the other person by holding resentment towards them. You're not doing anything to get back at them. So you're not even helping yourself that way. You're actually harming yourself as a way of trying to get back at the person.
Yeah.
For what they did, and that doesn't do any good, and it doesn't move us towards actual happiness and actual emotional freedom. And we can't connect with people if we don't have empathy and love. So I think a lot of you guys are going to notice a theme showing up in this conference, and nobody planned that, and a lot of us didn't know each other before we met here, and it's coming up over and over and over again. And I think that's because people are figuring out that we need to grow and we need to move forward. So I just wanted to say that, and say that you're...
Yeah, I think in part, and by the way, you're fucking awesome too. So thank you.
Thanks, Carlos.
This is a reaction to the Trump movement, in part. Look, a lot of our friends, wow, that's perfect thunderous right thing. I said Trump, and then, oh God, what is he gonna say? Nothing hateful, trust me. I've already written it. The one aspect of what happened with the whole Trump thing was that a lot of us were running on fear, and there was gonna be a split up within the libertarian movement as a whole, where certain people were going to be convinced that for some reason we had to give up on our principles and use force in this very specific occasion in order to ensure that we have freedom in the future, because that's never been used as a justification for anything. So as a result, though, the people who splintered off from that had to figure out a different way. Were we going to become lefty socialists? Hell no. Absolutely not. We were going to have to figure out, is this whole liberty thing just about the non-aggression principle? Or is it about a culture, a cultural shift, one that is more empathetic and compassionate? And the gentleman who just gave us a speech right before this talking about compassion is absolutely right. It's not going to be through a massive amount of hostility that we're going to gain a more peaceful and loving world. We always end up with the exact opposite. And so I can say whatever I want about people who decided to go for Trump. I empathize heavily with those individuals. We can be so stuck and frustrated with the amount of terrible things we're seeing in the world right now. And those are the times when a manipulation can occur the quickest and the most efficiently. And that is how you get war. So I send all my love to those folks, and if you guys want to come back and be anarchists again, I'm ready and willing.
All right.
This is where you're going to tell me why I'm wrong about Trump, right?
I don't care.
No, just kidding. Good man.
I voted for Vermin Supreme.
Good friend. Great guy.
Great guy. I had a situation in high school where one of my football players were basically neglected by their father. The mother had mental conditions, couldn't take care of him, so he moved down to Alabama to live with his father. His father left no food in the house, left him alone, did nothing. Eventually CPS came to take him, and then he called us, and we brought him into our home. How do you deal with situations like that where, you know, the family life is completely bad, and he goes to a situation where you have to help someone in that situation to get out of it? I mean, CPS is definitely bad, I give you that, but what are we going to do in order to fix bad familiar situations at home with abused children?
You know, the people who came up with CPS were being asked those same questions. And they were wrong, because they believed that one person or one group could figure out the solution to every single one of those problems. I'm not going to stand here as some guy who has lived in a couple states in the United States, has never really been poor at any point in my life, who, though I had some issues with being put on drugs and everything, I wasn't sexually abused as a young kid. I didn't have to deal with a lot of these problems. And I'm certainly not going to be able to stand here right now and say this is the exact solution for that issue, because there isn't one. the terrible thing about the government is that it monopolizes specific services in society. And once those are monopolized, people forget that those services were provided for before it, right? What will we do with roads? What will we do about old people? If we get rid of Social Security, they're all just going to die in the streets. And what are we going to do about child abuse? Well, before, there was a sense of community, right? If you have no sense of community, if everyone's in their little boxes and no one ever talks to their own neighbors, and everyone's too afraid to say anything, man, people are afraid to talk, then you're going to create a system where CPS seems necessary, right? They're breaking your legs, they're giving you a crush and say, look at how nice I am, right? And that's essentially the life we're living with Child Protective Services. I mean, personally, before I worked for CPS, I had stepped on people who were actually hitting their kids in public. First, the main one was, I remember it was a guy, it was like at a Whole Foods or something, a hippy-dippy older gentleman who was slapping his 4-year-old in the face. And I was listening to Stefan Molyneux at the time, actually, on my podcast. And I was like, oh, I'm fucking filled with rage right now. And so I saw this thing happening. I was like, I gotta stop. I gotta stop what's happening. So I put my hands behind my back because I'm a big Hispanic, right? If you're like this, a big Hispanic, an old guy, you're gonna get fucked up and shot, like immediately. Like I'm at a Whole Foods and someone's gonna come by anywhere and just shoot me and sprinkle crack on me. But no, I put my hand behind my head, like this, right? Because I knew there was a camera. And I said, this is not the best way to deal with this, guys. I said, does it make you feel like a man hit a 4-year-old girl? And he slapped the shit out of me, right? But it was a bitch slap, like it was nothing, right? And so I was like, oh, okay, whatever. So I get back up, and I'm still like there, and I kept my hands behind my back, and I was like, now do you feel like a man? Now do you feel like a man? Now do you feel like a man? And he kept hitting me, right? Just like, until security came by and separated us. And the security guard was like, I'm sorry, I have to separate this. I was like, of course you have to separate this. Like, we're at a grocery store. The weird thing for me was that he wasn't separating the old man hitting a kid. The fuck is that? You know, I can take this guy. You know, it's just fine. You know, it's not that big and tough. He looked like who was Dick Cheney. He looked remarkably like Dick Cheney. And out of nowhere, though, this is really what pissed me off. These moms came by and told me, you can't tell people how to deal with their kids. Immediate response. And, well, my response immediately was, I can't tell a husband not to beat his wife. Right? If I can't do that, right, then you can make your fucking argument, right? But these are kids. Why I'm doing what I'm doing is not for parents' rights. It's because I know that children are being abused in our society, right? The troubling thing was the amount of people who were putting in that pressure, and then cops came out of nowhere, right? Out of nowhere, whatever. Came in to shoot me now. They came to talk to me. That is a beautiful, humongous sign. 5 minutes. There we go. We're good to go. They came in to talk to me, and he said, next time call CPS. With what license plate number? Like, white guy hitting kid. You know, 24 hours later, where are they going to be able to find this person? But at the time, I was doing an internship where I was doing counseling with molested children. So that was my job because I just really love, you know, non-traumatic jobs. So that's what I was doing before I'd worked for CPS. And then I just decided there that I needed to root out child abuse, no matter what. And I was wrong. But I was living in a society where we were told that the only way you can have the power to help another human being is by being the gun. And that's the greatest lie that we've ever told. All right.
Hi. Earlier you talked, or someone asked a question about what are good strategies for dealing with CPS when they start to question you about your child and your past. What do you think about the strategy of just not saying anything at all, just refusing to answer questions entirely, much how you kind of deal with police and investigators?
It doesn't work. No, it doesn't work. I swear to God, if one of you sovereign citizen guys comes up to me afterwards, by the way, I'm done. No, every time I give a speech, someone comes up and they go, did you know if you use these special words, you can get your kid back? That's not true. I was working for the state. If someone told me special words, I'd consider them crazy. There's no special thing that can prevent all this from occurring. And sadly, if you don't say anything at all, they can use that as a charge for neglect and not listening. You can choose to do that. And in fact, if you're going to go that route, now the thing is with CPS, one of the most pernicious aspects is the vast majority of the cases are dealing with impoverished people. Like, I only saw Hispanic people, even though I was living in a city of 50% white people, right? But we were going after poor families and things like that. This is part of their community. So they couldn't afford attorneys. But if you can afford an attorney and you know they're going to come to your house, call up your attorney and say, no, I'm going to have my attorney talk to us in between this. That's a great, sure-footed way of being able to do that. But hell, man, I mean, a lot of the people I've talked to can't afford to buy a book. So it's really context dependent, and there's no magic pill against the state. I've had some great successes in the ways that I've done it. Just simple, like one article where I explain, like, here's the top 10 things to do when it comes to dealing with child protective services. And there's been a lot of kids who didn't end up at foster homes because of just those little guidelines. So I'd really recommend anyone who's into this. I mean, there's even free articles they can find. It's just like, there's just little steps that we can do. And the saddest thing is parents who have called me on the phone and says, I already had your book, but I didn't read it. My kids are gone now. You fucking had it in your hands. Like, what am I supposed to do with that information? Because once the kid is in the system, and we're talking, for weeks and months and everything else, then now you're totally sucked into the system. And that's when a lot of the hope is lost. And that's why the most important thing we need to do is figure out how to protect ourselves before that moment comes. And in order to be able to do that, we have to educate ourselves. And that's pretty much true of everything else in life.
Carlos, thank you. We've got time for one more quick question. 1 minute. 1 minute for one question.
Carlitos, I really don't have a question. I want to compliment you on how you've climbed out of the mud into what you are today. It's very hard, what you've done. Okay, I'm from a different generation. We didn't have ADD back then. We used the belt. My parents used the belt. If you had an issue with hypertension, we got belt whipped. So I was heavily ADD. I did not know this. But I will tell you this. There was a young gentleman down here with a hat that talked about how you deal with these emotions. The best thing is to forgive yourself. Forgive yourself, brother, because we are all messed up. We are all messed up. Our programming is messed up. We learn from our parents, so forgiveness. And let me tell you, we've been there with our son, been through hell and back. And I'll tell you what I learned in my journey of pain and suffering through the system. The best thing is don't participate in the system. Keep your kids away from it. Keep your kids away from it.
Thank you, sir.
Get your kids out of public school.
Keep your kids away from it.
Thank you.
When I gave up, there was a time I gave up on my son. Gave up. I said, Lord, please take him. And my wife said, no, we got to love our son. And right now, he's come out of the mud, just like you, out of the pits of hell. And he's a decent human being. Right. So my advice is, get out of the system. Don't use their food. If they're putting GMO in, put it back. They're giving you Ritalin, put it back. There's different ways. There's meditation. There's organic foods.
Right on, man.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Get out of the
Appreciate
system.
you saying that.
Hey, thank you very much for the love you've given yourself and your child. You're an awesome fucking person. I love all of you. It was wonderful speaking to you. I'll be around, so if you guys have any questions regarding child protective services you may have not wanted to go into publicly, I will be here for you guys. That's why I'm here.
Ladies and gentlemen, Carlos Morales. Carlos, thank you. Thank you, sir.
In a world where Antifa riots in the city streets, cops rage out of control, and the leader of the free world is a fat-ass casino owner, one event stands alone to make anarchy great again.
I actually love humanity. That is why I'm an anarchist.
Back Words in the building like we the ceiling. We illin', no matter who find it appealing. I'm here and I got a feeling that we'll be dealing a lot of pain with a penicillin. Get drilled in your head that we are monsters, and yeah, we come from the slums, and for months we've been pumped, but for once I am now comfortable. I want to grow, I want some more success, and I want to know that greatness can't be rushed, can't be lust, so face the fuss. Feel free to hate on us, we lace them up. Dudes, we done paid them up. Keep snakes away from us and safe from us, you might wanna be. Remember when clowns used to make fun of me and now they wanna be me? See me and they run at me, I'm gonna be the greatest, yeah I wanna be, but I am not the one to be the fakest. For the sake of being played, I'm here like I never left, set to hell. Nah, cause I can't just fail, so just prepare your ears, it'll get for real. Okay, from here, we will never take the sell, it's grind time. My mind and my thoughts, my highs and my faults, my wins and my loss. When will I fall off? It's a chance for me. You are now listening to Veracity. Yeah.
Fuck the media, fuck the banks, fuck drone strikes, fuck tanks, fuck hunger, fuck war, fuck ignoring of the poor, fuck the left, fuck the right, fuck the government. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.